So my name is Wright, and I'm here as a representative of the Center for Internet and Society in Bangalore, India, which is one of a number of centers for internets and societies in the world. This particular one is a standalone NGO. We're very small and engaged in issues, sort of broadly speaking, of openness and accessibility with regards to intellectual property and the internet. For the last several months, we at CIS have been working on a report on open government data in India that was funded by the Transparency and Accountability Initiative, which you read a little bit about in an earlier presentation. So I don't have much time, but I thought I'd try to sketch sort of general sense of where India is with respect to the idea of open government data and where it might be moving. Just a couple of weeks ago, when President Obama visited Mumbai, he and Prime Minister Singh of India released an announcement that the US and India are beginning an official dialogue on open government data. So hopefully this sort of signifies that India is taking this very seriously. What that dialogue will actually consist of in the long run, I don't really know. But there's an interesting blog post by Samantha Power on the White House website on this, which I do encourage you to take a look at. So open government data in India. I think first of all, you have to start with the problems, because there are a lot of them. There are over 1 billion people in India. That's a lot of data about a lot of different things. There's no national language. CIS-india.org. So there's no national language. We think about English and we think about Hindi. If anything, when we think of a national language in India. But if data or information is going to be useful to people, it needs to be accessible in a local language. And when you have a multitude of those in various states, as you do in India, it's sort of hard to decide in what language to make data available and where to focus, etc. Another issue is related. India is a nation of states. Some of those states are quite highly developed, technologically speaking. Some are not. Some are quite open. Some are not, and there's not necessarily a correspondence between the two. Probably the biggest issue, access to the internet. I don't think you can talk about open government data at all without talking about access to the internet and the internet as a tool for accessing open data. I think about 4% of India has some access to the internet today. Obviously, when you have 1 billion people and only 4% of those have access to the internet, that's quite a lot of people. But when you're talking about really using open government data to change society, which I think is what we all want to do in some way, access must be a core component of that. That brings to mind an interesting point, though. About 650 million people in India have cell phones. And one of the things that I don't think we've talked about too much in this conference, but which I hope we can all think about, is how to utilize mobile technologies to provide access to open government data for citizens and institutions. Probably the biggest problem that I've encountered in India, bureaucratic opposition. India, as we all know, is a highly bureaucratized society. Bureaucracy in some cases has more say over what people do and what programs are implemented than does, say, sort of the very top political structure. One of the things that you find when you talk about open government data in India is that the push for it, in the sense that there is a political push for it, is coming very much from the top. So it's coming from the Prime Minister, from members of his cabinet, from people at the highest levels of government, and to a very small extent from the bottom, from civil society. There's not a lot of movement in the middle, and in fact there is some opposition to it. Data is power, and bureaucrats, whose power in some ways rests on making decisions based on their data, don't want to give up that power. Data is also responsibility, and a lot of bureaucrats feel that in releasing data, they are relinquishing some responsibility or even being irresponsible with their data. One of my favorite examples from my research was in talking to the Commissioner of the Department of Environment in Maharashtra State, Commissioner of Agriculture. He told me that he couldn't release proper data related to both rainfall and pesticide spraying, because if the farmers had all of the data, they would riot and panic. And of course, how do you respond to that? It's a very difficult thing to respond to. So there's the bureaucratic thing. There's also the fact that Indian civil society isn't necessarily that well positioned in many respects to take advantage of open data schemes. In general, NGOs don't have a huge technical component to their work, and they're a little bit, I would say, naive, maybe even wary of associating with technologists. They don't speak the language, and they don't seem quite how to even phrase the question when they're approaching people that want to speak the language. So what does open government data mean in India? You talk to people at the very top of the government, and what it means is empowering citizens. It's almost a Gandhian idea of empowering citizens at the village level to make decisions for themselves. The idea is that if you put data or you put information in the hands of citizens, you provide them with the political power to make decisions about their own lives, their own villages, their districts, all the way up to the top of the society. So it's very much an idea of decentralization. In keeping with this, the focus of India, both in our research and in talking to governments of society, is not so much on reuse and mashing up and doing all the cool things we're talking about here. It's on access. That's very much sort of the core of the idea. So we're not talking about making data machine readable even. We're talking about having a data set. There might even be a scanned, lopsided PDF, but at least getting that information out to people and enabling them to use it. So I guess I think I'm already over time. But sort of the two components of open government data in India that we've looked at are, first of all, you need to automate processes. India is still very much a paper-pushing society. A lot of data isn't even digitized or in the process of being digitized. So first of all, you want to digitize information, and second of all, you want to enable people at the village level to access that information, whether that's via mobile technologies, community computing centers, or otherwise. In any case, if this is something you're interested in, or a space you're interested in working in, please do let me know. We'd love to facilitate any connections between here and India. Thank you very much.